Okay, comments about this week's discussions. What is it that we're tasked with doing during this week's discussion? Well, the task is everyone in this class just selects one of these above positions, whether it's moral relativism, absolutism, subjectivism, or even the moral mishmash. Doesn't matter. You select one of those positions and then you defend it. And so what does that work? Well, the task is to craft and post the most charitable arguments you can in favor of that position. Like we've discussed the pros and cons of them. We know now that every position has some things that need to be explained away or mitigated that could appear problematic to people. Or could appear good to people. And so the idea is we want to give the most charitable reading of whatever position you pick. You don't have to pick a position you actually agree with. Notice this. That's not a requirement of the discussion assignment. You just pick one of the positions we've talked about in this video, and then you generate reasons for why it's the best. The best in the sense of whatever your reasons for of best to it are. And so a potentially helpful structure you could think about opening your discussion post with so that everybody's on the same page, like knows what you're going to defend. You can use the old standard, like this is argumentation, like 101. It's philosophy does this. Philosophy loves to use this phrase. In ethics, it shows up a lot in ethics, but it also shows up in other domains of debate, anything with argumentation. Is you can always lead, well, I will argue that whatever, moral relativism, is the best metaethical position. Moral relativism is the best position because. Then you list your reasons. You emphasize, you strengthen the good qualities of it, the pros, and you mitigate the bad. You make the bad not seem so bad. Actually, there's more reasonable than typically one thinks. And so you just generate reasons to build the best possible case you can think of. Now, does that mean you need to write a treatise, like 50 pages? No, that's not the requirement of the assignment. The assignment, the purpose is to give everyone a chance to practice understanding a position. That's what we've been doing in this video, is I've been giving people a lot of words, a lot of examples of ways to make sense of whatever position they might want to take up and defend. And remember, you don't have to buy into it. You're just defending it. It doesn't, but you don't have to even believe in your own defense. You just have to generate a defense for a position. This is a task that you always end up with in any sort of argumentation-based, course, is that you have to first understand a position, then offer a defense of that position. It doesn't matter which one you pick. You just have, but the idea is your defense needs to be consistent with the position. It needs to demonstrate that you actually understand what's going on with it. And, the way you do that is you carefully read through this handout and rewatch the part of the video where I'm talking about it, if you need to. But the idea is you just argue, I will argue that moral objectivism is the best ethical position. Moral objectivism is the best ethical position, best position because. That's just one way you can get started. You can frame it differently, but this is one way to be able to hang out front so everybody, as soon as they see your post, they'll know what you're going to defend. I would encourage people to use this week, just to practice with it at least once. But if you find it's too difficult to be able to form your sentences, like your mind doesn't quite work as well with the I will argue that phrase, sometimes that happens. Prompts are helpful to some of us, not to others. You can word it differently, but you do need to have like that thesis style statement somewhere. Is like, you have to tell us what position you're going to defend as best, and then tell us what about it makes it the best. And the best in regards to a position of why you would want to pick it over all the others. Like why it's the one, to pick. If you've got to choose between one of the 5 we've looked at, moral subjectivism, moral relativism, moral objectivism, moral absolutism, or moral mishmash. Those are your 5 options. And so what you're doing with these reasons is why it's the one that you would pick amongst all the others. But while you're doing that, creating this charitable argument, you have to address those potential concerns. I mean, you want to sell it to us. You want us to buy in. So you're trying to give us reasons, if it's a position you actually do prefer, well, then you'll know your reasons for why, it sold you on it. But it can't just be, well, this corresponds most with my beliefs. That's fine. That can be one of your reasons. But you need to deal with some of these things, like the possible problems with it. Like that if you want to be a moral objectivist, then you need to let us know which of these things, nature, life, humanity, which of these things do you think scope over all of human cultures and societies? What are these universal sort of, standards that everyone needs to answer to? Because that's what an objectivist is doing, that's the position, is that who do we ultimately answer to? Well, to something that scopes beyond our individual human groups. Well, if you're going to defend moral objectivism, you need to point in the direction and kind of give a little bit of explanation, a sentence or two, of what that actually is. And so just dealing with the key objections, like if a person wanted to defend moral relativism, something they may want to deal with is try to say, well, try to make it seem reasonable to think that an island of serial killers could actually be perfectly morally good if they think they are. But their action could be maybe totally morally bad for us over here. But only because we think it's bad. They're right as far as their own moral truths go, and we would be right as far as our own moral truths go. Trying to make sense of that, you can use those examples like the Nazis or the island of child molesters, serial killers, just some kind of example that you can defend and make that seem plausible. Because that's where every attack on moral relativism is going to come from. And because now everybody knows these potential strengths and weaknesses of these positions, you need to kind of think in terms of, well, how are these people going to try to respond to me? Your peers, will they let you get away with it? That's the sort of thing to kind of keep in mind. But realize with this, like I said, you don't have to write a treatise, hundreds and hundreds of paragraphs. That's not necessary. A paragraph or two, or even one paragraph that's got, enough sentences. You just need to make a defense. Like, give the reasons that sold you on the position, or that you think might be very attractive to other people about the position. But don't overlook its weaknesses. Absolutely not. That's how typically, if you can address the potential weaknesses of a position and say, yeah, they're not actually all that bad, that makes the position look much more appealing to people than it otherwise would. So this is to actually help you, to give you some ideas about how to do this. And also, sometimes when you're crafting, like the purpose is to do a charitable argument, keep in mind that philosophical pattern of inquiry that I keep pointing to, that we looked at week 1, week 2, now it's week 3. I'm mentioning it again. That one of the steps in it is, as soon as you gather like an argument, an author, you understand, you think their position or whatever their whole argument is, then you most charitably restate it. You try to give it whatever it needs to look the best it can, with its remaining consistent to the position taken. So you can think of examples where a moral subjectivist position looks really attractive. Like some moral issue, human rights, censorship, deception, any of these. There's many, many, many of these. But just think of a scenario where it would look really good to be a moral subjectivist. And just have one scenario, if you do it well, can make moral subjectivism look extremely appealing. So keep that in mind. When you're building a charitable argument, the most charitable, you're trying to sell it. That's what you're doing. You want people to buy it. So that's the challenge is, argumentation is not always about, selling and people buying it. It's not always about that. Really, all this is for us is a learning. We're trying to learn how to do these things because it's helpful. It's a skill. We're practicing. But the idea is this week it is about buying and selling. Like, I will argue that this is the best metaethical position, and it's the best because. I mean, sell us on it. And then when we interact and we discuss, that's cool. But keep in mind that whatever position you defend, I'm telling everybody this now, that you can't assume that the author, whoever the person is that makes the defense, that they actually buy into their own reasoning. So you're just looking at the reasons that are given. You're not, assessing the writer or the author as a person. You're just looking at the argumentation. That's it. You're looking at it as though it's like a commercial, and you have to ask, would you buy it? And then if you say yes, then you tell the person why in your response. What did they do right? What are their reasons was most appealing? What is it that sold you on the idea? And then on the other side of it is, if you don't buy it, well, where did the reasoning not convince you? What is it? What reason seems mistaken or untrue? Or you can do this. You can try to help someone build an even stronger case. You can say, yeah, I see where you were going with your reasoning in support of moral relativism. You could have added this in there and it would be even more appealing. So you can help each other. And that's what we're doing this week, is just to see if we can generate across all of our discussion posts like the best showing for these positions. And remember, we want to do this because we want to understand these positions in the most charitable light so we can understand what is underlying many of these arguments that we'll be encountering throughout this semester. And throughout just everyday life and your interactions, seeing the news, at work, whatever, it's good to have these positions understood very well, because they're so helpful looking at an argument to understand what the person's assuming. These positions are assumed. They're like fundamental assumptions. Any flaws they have as positions is flaws that's going to be in that argument. Any strengths they have as positions, if they're assumed, is going to be strengths in the argument. And so we need that familiarity with them. So that's the task for this week's discussion. I hope these words have helped everybody gain a sense of what's going on, what we're doing. Make the most charitable case you can. Try to sell it to all the rest of us. One of the ways you need to do that is to address some of those potential cons. Make them not so bad, so con-like. And, emphasize the pros too. Or, if you see other pros, cons, by all means, you can use those. I've just given everybody, something to get started by giving these sort of pro-con lists. The things, the potential strengths and weaknesses of the positions. And that everybody's job is just to defend it. Try to sell other people on it. And then when you start giving people feedback, give them actual feedback on what they say. What parts of what they said were good. That's what sold you. That's why you agreed, is this sentence. Or this is why I would disagree, this example. Be very specific in your feedback or replies this week.